back on over this. What's up everybody, Ben here. I have a cool product that I picked up from my good buddy Alan Anderson at Uncle Al's Automotive in Oregon is where his place is. And this is a pretty popular part. The brand name is Jagged S Customs, and this is the oil tank for the YXZ-1000. Jagged S makes a few things, I think, for the YXZ platform. I'm not real familiar with the company, but I've heard their name a few times. But this particular product I love. I had it on my old YXZ, a different version of this. So they offer two different sizes. So this is the oversized model that replaces the factory oil tank, and then they have another one that's a standard size. It's a little bit shorter than this. This oversized model holds 2 additional quarts, so that helps with longevity of your oil, to your intervals for your oil changes, as well as temperatures as well. It lets the oil sit in the tank where it can cool off longer before it circulates through the motor again, which is where it heats up. So that's why greater oil volume equals lower temperatures. It's a great quality part, good fittings, great welding, and the biggest advantage, in my opinion, is this auxiliary drain plug, or this drain plug for the auxiliary tank is far superior to the factory product. So I've got 2 here. This is the finish that it comes in. It's not really polished, but it's raw aluminum. It looks great. I think it's beautiful. I love raw aluminum or polished aluminum. I have this one powder coated for my daughter's YXZ that's red and black. And so this one, the polished one, I'm gonna leave. It goes on Carter's car, my son's car, because this car is bright blue, and I've left some polished parts on it. So where this tank goes, the factory oil tank is behind this cover. You undo these and drop this part, and under there is the factory oil tank. I will get started on that now. It's time to do an oil change on this vehicle, so it's a good opportunity to go ahead and swap the oil tank. So I'm gonna basically do an oil change. These are 3 10mm bolts. All right, so I got some of those other parts off just to give me some more room. So since this gets kind of dirty, the oil attracts a little film of sand or dirt. I always just use like some carb cleaner to spray off all of these points before I start turning wrenches on them. Today I'm just using AutoZone carb cleaner because it's cheap. I usually use B12 Chem Tool, but it's like twice the price. And this is just kind of rough cleaning in my opinion. Just like that. You want to avoid painted surfaces. And you'll notice I have my drip tray already in place so that all the debris and carb cleaner drips down into it. And watch your eyes. Highly recommend using eye protection. Okay, and also before draining the oil tank, you want to crack this loose so that it drains fully and properly. So I just kind of leave it like that. And now it's a 12mm. And it's gonna get messy, and do your best to catch your bolt before you lose it. Some black oil. This is the first oil change for this car. That is the factory oil that's been put in it, and it has I don't know, maybe a few hundred miles on it. Okay, that's about drained. I'm just going to come back to this in a minute because we're gonna take this tank out, but for now the oil is pretty much out of it. I'm just gonna wipe it a bit and put the factory drain plug back in. We will not be reusing this drain plug with the new oil tank. It has a better plug on it. And this is the weak point, and in my opinion, the main reason to upgrade to an aftermarket oil tank like this Jagged S model, because this is aluminum, this is steel. And when you put a steel bolt into aluminum threads, it's only a matter of time before they strip or gum up or gall up the threads in the aluminum, because aluminum is a lot softer metal. So lots of times you'll over torque that. Even if you torque it to spec, over time it will eventually either hurt the threads, or this bung actually kind of flexes. Even when you break it loose, you can feel it kind of flex, and so that base of that bung will crack sometimes as well. All right, so now I'm going to raise the car up and take off the skid plates to access the bottom of the engine. So I have the YXZ-1000 owner's manual or service manual. I like to use the manuals for all the cars that I have. This is the 2020 model. Some of them combine the SS models and the stick shift models in one manual. My 19 manual is that way. The 2020 is not that way apparently. So I think there's enough difference now that they make them different. Anyway, so here on page 3-20 is you're looking for the hex head, the Allen head with, it's the one that looks different under here. It has a little arrow next to it, a little triangle. So it's this one here. There's also a copper washer on it that you don't want to lose. So I'm just gonna crack that loose, get my drain pan underneath it, and let the oil drain. While that oil is draining, I will also remove the oil filter. Factory oil filters have just like some flat spots. You have to use an oil filter wrench. So this is something, I think I got this at like AutoZone or something like that. 65/67 millimeter with 14 flutes, I guess, is what works for me. However, factories are known to over tighten these or whatever. Sometimes they're just very difficult to get off, so we'll see. So what I ended up doing, as you see here, is taking a punch and poked it all the way through the entire filter. And now the whole thing turns with a little force. So I'm going to continue to get that to turn and unscrew this bastard. All right, so Alan sent me this Canon oil filter, which I highly recommend. They are fantastic, and they have a 17mm hex head on them, so you don't have to deal with what I just did, getting the factory filter off. I buy the same ones from Weller, like I buy them a case at a time. I get the Lucas gear oil for the differentials, and then I get the Lucas 10W40 for the engine and transmission. So that's what I'm going to be putting in. I will start with, I don't have any partial can, these are all going to be new. I will start with the filter. I'll put a little bit in the filter first. And the only purpose here is to kind of saturate the oil filter element that's in there. Before you put it on the machine, and it has to circulate that. Okay, so I put a little bit more in there till it kind of rests just below those threads. That element kind of soaked it up. Also, I will mention this drain does not go to plumbing. It goes to a bucket underneath my workstation, so don't stress out about oil going down my drain. It's that way on purpose. So here under the car, just thread it on. Probably gonna lose some of that oil. And I just spin it on until it kind of makes contact. That'll more or less seal it. And then that is a 17mm head. Try to keep this clean. I hate oil residue all over everything underneath the car, so I try to keep it clean as I go and wipe that carb cleaner off of your stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna get my socket and torque wrench, and we will torque these down. Okay, looking at the book, the oil plug drain bolt for the engine, the crankcase, is 10 Newton meters. And that is this, what is that, H5 Allen key. That's not very much. There we go. Okay, so 17 Newton meters on the 17mm, which is on the oil filter. This is pretty easy to turn right now because it has that oil on the O-ring. And that's it. I highly recommend you do not over tighten that. It seems like it's not enough. Don't worry about it. It has an O-ring, and the O-ring seals very well. If you put that on there very tight, it's going to be a nightmare to get off, just like my factory one was that you saw up there. All right, so that's it underneath the car. I'm going to lower the car back down and remove the OEM oil tank now. Okay, so after further inspection, there is another mounting bolt that I can't get to with these plastic pieces on, so I'm going to take off this piece and also this fender here on the outside. All right, got that out of the way. So I'm gonna undo this mounting bolt, this mounting bolt, and this mounting bolt back there. That one has a GYTR turbo plenum bracket attached to it, so I'll be mindful of that. Your car may or may not have that if you have a turbo kit or some other aftermarket accessory that kind of uses that mounting bracket also. Okay, so before I unmount the tank, I'm going to remove all of its connectors here. As far as the hosing, there's a top hose and a bottom hose and a side hose. I got hose in different area codes. Hose. I'll be all night. The bottom one uses these. That is a H5 Allen head, just like the oil drain bolt on the bottom of the engine. Okay, so I just undid the clamp on that hose, and the bottom one, and then the bolts. I'm going to undo the clamp a little bit more. This top one back here. Sorry, I'm doing it one-handed. Looks like it has a washer on it. Got a deep socket for this one. Extension was too long. Without extension was too short. Now your situation back here is going to be different probably because this car has BYTR turbo kit as well as these Fox shocks with external reservoirs, which is also in the way right now. Okay, so I got all the bolts out. It's basically just sitting on these hoses. I have pried the top hose off, and these just gotta slip out. And that is all it really takes. And the main thing you kind of want to do is go straight up with it because you're trying to expose this screen at the bottom, hopefully without damaging it much. All right, real quick, I'll point out, that is what my screen looks like. I would prefer it not have those things in it, but I will kind of pull that off and analyze what those little fibers are. This is engine oil, so that might be sand, I'm not sure, but I'll look into that. Also on the bottom, please note there is an O-ring that you want to grab. So mine stuck to the tank. Well, my battery died on the camera, but you got the point. I had to pull the O-ring off the bottom of the tank there, and also pulled that filter. Well, it's not really a filter, it's a screen off the hose as well. So I'm just basically flushing them. And it appears that I have some debris. I think it's sand that the screen caught. I don't think any has gone through the motor or anything like that, but that screen and my engine oil filter definitely have some particles that are not desirable. So I think it's either sand, or this is the first oil change, so it might still be some assembly lube and things like that. So all I'm doing is kind of cleaning these things up in my parts washing sink here. This is a sink that drains into a bucket. It is not going into the water drain. And I also went and just bought some more carb cleaner. So here's the Jagged S oil tank. It is recommended that you flush it first. So I'm going to use the same stuff, the carb cleaner here, to flush this tank. I'm going to pull off this drain plug, and then I'm just basically going to spray a bunch of carb cleaner through the top, comes out the bottom, and vice versa. Okay, got it all cleaned up. I'm going to just start kind of assembling this on the bench. First, set this O-ring in so that it seats in that little channel just right. I do have a little dab of oil or grease on it to kind of make it want to sit right. Not much, but a little bit. And then you put the screen in, your OEM screen and bottom, and make sure that's pointing out, pointing out, pointing away. And then the two OEM fasteners. And these are torqued to I'm looking at the book over here, torqued to 7 Newton meters, which is not very much. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, I'm going to recommend that you replace this oil. It's called the oil strainer. That's what the Yamaha book says, is to clean it with solvent or replace it. And I'm just telling you now, if your YXZ has many miles on it at all, that you should go ahead and replace it, assuming they're available. Okay, so I'm set at 7 Newton meters, which, as you see, is not much. Okay, and then also the drain plug I'm going to go ahead and put in. So this is the drain plug that comes with this aftermarket tank. It is a 14 millimeter, it has its own gasket, so it's a bigger bolt head, and it is 16 Newton meters is the factory spec. I don't see a different spec for this one. It could probably be more, but I'm not going to do more unless I have to do more. I might ask Alan. I went to the Jagged S Customs website because I was curious about the way this bottom hose works down here, because it's not going to fit to the factory location. And their photograph, the only photograph they have of the oversized tank on their website, does not show the bottom hose on. So upon reading further on their website, in the description it says that you have to trim the OEM line. So I'm gonna mock this up there, and then I will do that. Okay, so this is 16 Newton meters, which is the factory spec, and I have not seen a different spec from Jagged S. I think it could be more, but I'm not gonna do it anymore. And then also, last but not least, it uses the OEM dipstick. I cleaned this one up whenever I flushed. Of course, make sure you keep the O-ring intact. No need to torque that down or anything. Just give it a couple of turns with your finger, and that's it. Okay, so I'm going to use the 3 OEM 10 millimeter bolts and head over to the car to mount this. Okay, so I'm back here at the car. I'm going to remove this line first. This is supposed to get trimmed in order to fit the new oil tank. So I'm going to take off all these things that I left on it. This is a 10 millimeter. It's just like a little two-sided clamp. Be sure not to lose the parts whenever you undo it. And then this rubber piece there, I'm going to leave that intact. So this probably had some oil in the bottom of it there. Oh, yep, it's got oil in the line. It's already leaking down. So I'm going to raise the car up and get my oil drain underneath it before I make any more of a mess. Yeah, that's a mess for sure. I guess if you were good, you could rig up some sort of little funnel system or something that would catch that. So, anyways, it's kind of interesting to see how much oil stays in the lines, even when you do a full oil change. There's still quite a bit in that line. Okay, I'm going to clean up the mess a little bit and then hang the new oil tank. I'm going to go ahead and slip on this side hose. Okay, so I've got them all started. You can see that one there now, that one there, and then there it is. So I've got them all started. I'm going to tighten all those up and get the torque spec. I will let you know whenever I'm torquing down. Okay, the spec is 10 Newton meters per the factory book, which is not very much. You can see I already just about got it there with the regular socket. This is a very small torque wrench, but I like it because I can get it into small places, and these are all very small torque values. And again, this is Newton meters, so 10 Newton meters. While I've got the torque wrench out, I am going to redo this. Obviously, I put this on wrong. Let's go ahead and slide this. back on. Here's the clamp. Let's go ahead and do the same here. Make sure that's slid up good. And you can feel like a little nub right there with your fingertip, and you want to make sure that your clamp is above the nub. It's like a little flange on the end. See how that one is? That little nub should be clamped on the clamp should be on the other side. So the clamp should be clamping here. You don't want to put your clamp here. So, okay, I'm just going to undo that and flip it around, and then take a look at what we got to do for this bottom hose. Okay, so what I came up with is I'm going to cut the factory hard line so that it's just long enough to pass through this bracket. And then I'm gonna have it pass through the bracket and I can clamp it. Really, I could clamp it on either side, but I think I'd like to clamp it on this far side. It won't be flanged like we talked about on the other one, but that way it still has the support of this bracket with the hard line all the way through it. So, just looking at this, it's gonna be like right there. I got a Sawzall with a metal blade or a grinder or something, I'll figure it out. Okay, this is what I came up with. Cut that far. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, I'm going to pull that off now, by the way. I just left it on there as kind of a marker. So I'm putting the bottom in first at the factory location. Then I'm going to slip this over this and pass it through the clamp. Okay, so I think something like that. There's no instructions for this, so I'm just kind of figuring out what I think will work here. So now my plan is to fasten the hose clamp like that, or I'll do it like this so it looks better. Go ahead and slip this one on all the way. Okay, now I'm going to tighten that. I believe it's a little 8mm. Okay, so I'm not going to put this bodywork or anything back on yet until I run the engine. So what I'm going to do now is fill it with oil. Checking all my fasteners, checking all my clamps. Looking under here. Okay, so I'm gonna put some oil in it now and see where it goes. I think it's gonna take 5 quarts or something, I don't know, I guess factory is somewhere around 3 quarts. This is supposed to add 2 more, so I'm gonna dump like 4 in the tank and then see where we're at. And this is the Lucas brand that I use, that I get from Weller, and I've been very successful with it so far. Very happy with it. And as I'm pouring this, I am watching for leaks below. I should mention that is 4 quarts, including the, oh, what was it? Maybe less than a cup of oil that went in the oil filter. So I did crack open a new quart for the oil filter, and then I did finish that quart just now. Try to not make a mess here. Okay, so oil level has been a topic of discussion on many times. I thread the dipstick down to check oil level. Most people do. I've heard some people say you just need to touch it to the threads. Okay, so that's on the dipstick. So it's actually kind of high on the dipstick. So what I'm gonna do is start the engine and let it cycle. A warning about YXZ-1000s. The first time you start the engine after an oil change, it sounds absolutely terrible for about 3 or 4 seconds. The top end takes a little bit to prime the oil filter or the oil pump system or the oil, I don't know, whatever. It doesn't get oil pressure and doesn't pump and doesn't get lubrication to the top end, to the camshafts for a few seconds, and it makes a terrible noise. It's normal to go away after 3, 4, 5 seconds, something like that. In my experience, it's less than that. It's like 1 or 2 seconds. But after this much of a drain in a new oil tank, it might take longer. Just listen to it. If it sounds terrible for more than a few seconds, you might want to turn it off and try again. It might have something to do with the chain tensioner also, or the tension on the chain. I think that's very loud as well, but it's a noisy valve train. Most overhead cam motors are. All right, moment of truth. Okay, so I heard that. It sounded terrible for longer than normal, but it's gone. It's about 5 seconds this time. necessarily want it to warm up. I did want to kind of circulate it though. I will let it sit for a second and then I will check oil level. So I don't know if you could hear me talking over the engine sound, but it sounded really bad for about 5 seconds, which is longer than normal for me for this car. So, but it stopped. So it's just one of those things where all that oil has to kind of prime the pump or pressurize or something. I don't know, but don't freak out. It makes noise. Okay, I'm gonna wait for a minute. Okay, so I just checked it. It's been about 5 minutes and it is not even on the dipstick now. So it's got 4 full quarts in it. Now I'm gonna put in a full 5th quart. And let's see what happens. All right, so I let it warm back up after putting that 5th quart in it. I got it all the way up to operating temperature, 200 degrees. The fan kicked on, the fan came down. And while it was doing that, I went ahead and put these panels back on. They're very simple. I will remind you when putting body panels on, just kind of start all of your screws. Don't tighten any of them until you're ready, until you've got them all in. And remember, these 2 are the hex head 10mm. All the others are these Allen keys or Allen head bolts. This is the only bolt that has this spacer. And yes, if you're noticing, these are orange plastics that I've painted blue. So you'll see that on my rub marks where the bolts are. Anyways, Jagged S Customs oversize oil tank appears 5 quarts is exactly the right amount. I will ride it and check it after my first ride, but here it is. I think it looks fantastic. I will also keep an eye on the custom hose and clamp job that I did there, because there wasn't really any real definition on the website or the instructions or anything like that. So I'll keep an eye on that, retorque everything or check torque on everything. And that's a wrap for this. I'd like to thank Alan Anderson at Uncle Al's Automotive. I'll leave a link in the description here to his website and maybe his phone number or something. He's a great contact, great guy to get a hold of. If you need YXZ stuff, he specializes in it. He has every part you could imagine, and he usually gets people taken care of. So that's it. Thanks a lot, and like and subscribe.